Hello, everybody, and welcome to the review of Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, the sequel of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which came out in 2018. Where to even start, honestly? I have to be completely upfront and say that I've watched this movie about 3 times now so far, which might be a mental health issue, but nonetheless, it is the case. Honestly, just to say that I've loved it every single time. It's never gotten boring, even after 3 watches, which I think is quite a statement in and of itself. They really one-upped themselves, I think, in this one, and completely cleared the high bar and high expectations that the first movie had set, which is quite incredible. And just to start off talking about the plot here, it was quite a complex plot. The biggest plot point was the multiverse, the Spider-Verse, which is their take on this sort of multiverse trope that has been going around film and, well, superhero films for the past, it seems like 5 years now, starting with the Avengers. I've been quite underwhelmed with some of the multiverse tropes in the past. Especially my mind goes to Doctor Who. Doctor Strange's The Multiverse of Madness, which honestly I wasn't a big fan of, and that's coming from a huge Marvel fan. I didn't enjoy it. I thought it was pretty cringy how they did it, and it didn't really add much value. I think they kind of just added multiverse because let's add the multiverse, it'll be entertaining, and it was quite, hollow. Across the Spider-Verse did it brilliantly. I think it added to the story. I think the mixture of canon events and the Spider-Verse was brilliant. Having each universe have their own feel and style also was a brilliant choice, because it just adds to the depth of the Spider-Verse. Instead of just saying, oh, there's 50 different worlds and they're all kind of a bit different, but they don't add much. In this movie, they really add a lot. Obviously, Gwen's world being a beautiful artistic masterpiece, and obviously Pavitra's world, which was hilarious, very intriguing. So I think the way they handled the multiverse, brilliant. It kept me engaged. It was never cringy. Obviously, bringing all the Spider-Men, that was very interesting. Seeing all the Easter eggs, the bringing in of canon events, I think was a cool, thing as well. Canon events being events that have to happen in the Spider-Verse, if not, the whole fabric of reality starts breaking down. They really did it in a way that was quite interesting. It added to the story. It made sense with all of these Spider-Man stories and somebody dying, whether it be Uncle Ben, Aunt May, or Gwen, Mary Jane. It made sense that all of these events were canon events and were things that were a part of the Spider-Man legacy. No matter what Spider-Man you were going to have to deal with loss and deep pain, and that's what made those heroes the heroes that they were. I think it was a beautiful way of implementing that. Not only that, obviously, the addition of Spot was brilliant. He served as kind of a comic relief at the beginning. Really funny. I mean, I was cracking up laughing, which it doesn't say much because I laugh at most things, but I think, the jokes were quite funny, and he was seen as kind of a weak character at the beginning. And I was curious as to how that would change and develop, or whether that would stay the same, and it did end up developing. His character ended up being one of the most fascinating character arcs in the movie and in the series so far, with him at the beginning obviously being treated like a weak villain, Miles not really paying much attention to him, texting his dad, kind of disrespecting him, and over time he takes that disrespect and it turns into anger, and he gives himself more power. You can see how towards the end he really takes on, and you know, props to the voice acting of the Spot as well. It's Jason Schwartzman. So he did a wonderful job on that performance. And towards the end, honestly, I feared that character. Brilliant. One of the last sort of plot points that we'll touch on is the end, which, spoiler alert, obviously this is a review with spoilers. The end being quite a bit of a cliffhanger, which I didn't expect, no one seemed to expect. Some people have had problems with that, saying that it's not satisfactory, that they would have liked them to wrap it up sooner and then maybe start with that cliffhanger in the next movie. But having just seen this second one and not having seen the third one yet and the full trilogy, I would disagree personally. I think the cliffhanger choice was a stroke of genius. It's a creative decision that doesn't tend to happen anymore in cinema. I mean, I can't remember the last time that there was a cliffhanger of that magnitude. I guess maybe Avengers Infinity War. It doesn't happen very often. And I think that's a pity because it can be used, when used well, very effectively. To the point where everybody now is just waiting for that third movie and is probably gonna go and watch that third movie immediately. It just really adds to that anticipation. And not only that, obviously the cliffhanger in and of itself was crazy. The fact that Miles ended up in the wrong universe, how the audience slowly started figuring that out as he was talking to his mother, and those chimes were starting to build up of, okay, something's going on, something's going wrong here, with his mother not really knowing what the hell he's talking about when he reveals he's Spider-Man. Then everyone's like, okay, what's happening? And then obviously they reveal it with Gwen like climbing into his room and realizing he's not there and he's in a different universe. And that suspense of not knowing what's gonna happen there is brilliant. You know, because I think most people didn't know what was gonna happen. Obviously his uncle walks in, everyone assumes that his uncle's the bad guy, and then boom, the hammer's dropped and we realize that it's actually himself. I haven't felt that way in a movie. The first time I watched it, my jaw was dropped. From the moment that I realized he was in a different universe to the moment that Miles revealed himself as the Prowler, I was completely floored, shocked even. But I think they just pulled the strings perfectly. I would not ever complain about that end. I think it was really interesting. The only thing is, obviously, I'm curious to see how they follow that up. I don't know if there's enough content there for a third movie, to be perfectly honest. That's something that worries me. So we'll see. I mean, they created back-to-back some of the best animated films of all time, in my opinion. It'll be very hard to keep up that standard, but we'll see. Moving on to some of the characters, I know I talked about Spot and his character arc. I want to talk about Gwen. This movie ended up being focused a bit more on Gwen than the first one, showing us her story at the beginning, showing us her world, showing us her relationship with her father, which is extremely emotional and touching and deep. Spider-Woman ends up being accused by her father, who's the police captain, for killing her friend Peter at the time. Obviously, there's friction there. Right at the beginning of the movie, she ends up revealing herself to her dad, hoping that her dad will understand, look, that wasn't me. You know, sort of crying for help and trying to get past his fear of who she is. And it doesn't work at the beginning. He continues to try to arrest her, and then she ends up leaving with Miguel O'Hara and joining the secret society of Spider-Man. But it's beautifully done, and you can see the loneliness, you can see her missing Miles. I love the art style that they choose for her world, that sort of watercolor, pastels, the fact that the art evolves as she's having conversations with her father is beautiful. You can see it, you can see the paint changing and dripping across the background of the characters as they're speaking, kind of as to portray their emotions in real time. I've never seen anything like that done before, personally, in an animated film, and I don't even know how many more superlatives to use. It was gorgeous. It could have been tacky and a bit weird, but the way they did it was great, and Gwen's character gains a lot more depth due to her backstory. We should talk about as well Miguel O'Hara, because he's a villain in the movie. He's not the main villain, and he's a bit of a complex character. Obviously, he has his reasons for wanting to keep the Spider-Verse intact, which is completely understandable, and I think that Oscar Isaac does a brilliant job voicing him. The voice acting in the movie in general was amazing, from Oscar Isaac to Daniel Kaluuya as Hobie, Spider-Punk, which a great addition, by the way. Everyone loves Spider-Punk. I couldn't understand what the fuck he was saying for half the movie, but at some point I did start to comprehend what his lines meant. So the voice acting is great. Miguel O'Hara does a great job being an antagonist. They sort of joke about him being the only Spider-Man that isn't comedic relief or doesn't have witty, fun lines. So that's a really interesting parallel there to draw. His music as well is great. That introduction of Miguel O'Hara at the beginning when he comes into Gwen's world and you hear that first bit of it's so interesting. It's kind of similar to the Prowler music at the beginning in the first movie, and that just adds to the suspense of the character, to be honest. We have Miles' growth as a character, him and his parents. We get to see a lot of their relationship, how that's evolved over time, how they're struggling to deal with him growing up. He's kind of not rebelling, but he's giving priority to his Spider-Man responsibilities, not knowing how to communicate that with his parents, kind of annoyed that they're on his back, like typical teenage behavior, honestly. And we see that evolve, and his parents sort of lost at how to deal with him, until we see a beautiful moment with him and his mother where his mom sees him interacting with Gwen, and he sees him sad that Gwen's leaving, and she finally says, okay, I'm gonna try to connect with my child, and tells him, look, go, she kind of sets him free. It makes for a really relatable moment. It really hit home for me, made me a bit emotional, seeing that realness from her face. It's an animated movie, but you can really see her processing those emotions and torn, but at the same time loving towards Miles. It's a beautiful interaction, and it kind of catapults their relationship in a positive way, I think. What have I missed? I think, Miles and Gwen's relationship progresses, and their romance is subtle, yet quite intriguing. They have one of the most beautifully animated scenes in the movie where they're both upside down, looking at an upside down New York, just talking earnestly to each other about their feelings, basically. And I thought that was really a cute and honest representation of teenage love, kind of not knowing how to go about it, kind of a bit awkward, and not knowing how to be full forward with your feelings. It was a very cute moment in the movie, I think, that added to grounding the movie as a whole. And that's another thing that I would say. Across the Spider-Verse does a brilliant job in grounding itself in real human emotion. You have Miles and his family, you have Gwen and her family, you have Miguel O'Hara and his family, or lack thereof, you have the Spot and his arc, you have Miles and Gwen, Gwen and her mentor. It's all grounded in real human relationship and human emotion, and that gives us stark contrast against the whole big picture overwhelmingness of the Spider-Verse and all of its intricacies and complexity. And I think that's why it works, because they're able to ground the movie in something completely relatable, even though it's about this otherworldly experience. The music is done by Metro Booming, the album, and the score is done by Daniel Pemberton, who did the score for the first movie, and he does a great job. I have some of those tracks already on my phone, on my Spotify, because they're just so good and powerful, especially the music at the end with the crescendo as we're starting to realize the consequences of what's happening with Miles and anti-Miles, for lack of a better term. He does a great job with it. The music by Metro Booming, you know, the music in the first movie was very lauded and very heavily praised. I think the second movie does just as good of a job with it, and some of the songs there are really nice. My favorite, for example, is the one by James Blake, which is called Hummingbird. And yeah, overall the music was quite tight. I think they chose the right moments to put music in, they chose the right moments to put a score in, and that balance is quite even, I think, throughout the movie. And the last thing that I'll touch on, I guess, after this scintillating, stellar review so far of Beyond the Spider-Verse, is one of the biggest talking points for an animation movie: the animation. The animation carries on from the first movie, is just as crisp, beautiful. The Miles world is still very comic book-y, and they do a very good job with that. And the animation throughout the rest of the movie is crisp, it's very enjoyable, it's beautiful. So yeah, I think they do a great job there. And the last thing to touch on are the Easter eggs. There's a ton of Easter eggs throughout the movie, from Miles's roommate playing the Spider-Man game on his PC as they're talking, to you know, a bunch of the different Spider-Man there, Childish Gambino being the Prowler in one of the cages. Real Easter eggs all over the place. One of the billboards, I don't know if anyone caught this, but one of the billboards as Miles is swinging by says like soda, a generic pop version or something like that. It's just funny things like that that you can see in the background that shows the amount of dedication and time and care that the animators have put into this film, just putting little bits and pieces all over the place for you to discover as you see it multiple times. And that's why I couldn't just see it once. You know, this is one of few films ever, no other film I would say has ever made me feel after the first watch like I need to watch this again ASAP, because there are so many things that you miss, because it's also quite fast paced like the first movie. And so there's things that you miss, there's lines that you miss, there's you know, Easter eggs that you miss, and I think you really appreciate that on a second and third watch. Just to cap this review off, it has already placed itself as one of my favorite animation movies of all time. I think behind Howl's Moving Castle by Studio Ghibli, you know, and I've watched a lot of animated movies, so that should tell you enough that it really is an absolute fucking masterpiece. Anyway, guys, that's my review for Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, one of the best animated films of all time. Check it out in cinemas near you, and let me know what you guys think. I want to know your thoughts down in the comment sections below. And yeah, I think I'm gonna leave that one there. For my score, I'm gonna give it 10 out of 10. It was perfect for me personally. Yeah, a perfect score. See you guys later. Miguel, out.